Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is the podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I am so happy to be with you once again post-Christmas. I hope if you celebrate Christmas, you had a wonderful Christmas. If you are celebrating Hanukkah, I hope that your 8 days are going well. What is it, day 4, I think? 22nd? I don't know. Nobody said there would be math. At any rate, I hope your holidays have been going well, are going well, continue to go well, whatever the case may be. I had a lovely, lovely Christmas and had a very amazing early Christmas present on Christmas Eve in the form of a new baby in our family, and so just over the moon about that. I could do the entire episode just telling you about her little cheeks, but I won't. We're gonna talk about books, and specifically we're going to talk about books by Miranda Oh, who is the author I am speaking with for today's episode. She is currently working on a series, 2 of which are out. It's a trilogy, actually, and the series is called Chin Up Tits Out, which I told her I was laughing because when these things get scheduled, you don't really think about timing, and I thought that was just a hilarious title to have for the week of Christmas. In fact, I was talking to my mom and my sister. My sister is currently at my parents' house with her kiddos, which makes me jealous, but that's okay. I'm not there. Anyway, I was talking to them about this week's interview, and I told them what the title of the series was, and there was like crickets. And then finally my sister said, okay, what kind of books are those? And so then I explained it to her. They are, it's described as a chick-lit romantic comedy, in case you were wondering. This is, not necessarily a self-help book, although that would be a good title for a self-help book. Let me give you the description of the first one. It is called Remember No Matter What, Chin Up Tits Out. And 18-year-old Hadley has led a charmed life, always knowing exactly what she wanted from it. She'd had her life distinctly mapped out in her head for as long as she remembered. But a chance meeting sends her into a tailspin, albeit a sensationally delicious one. As she travels halfway across the world to fight for what's hers, she stumbles time after time. It's a journey of love, tears, and learning, as she fights and attempts to overcome multiple hurdles standing in her way. Again, that is the description of Remember No Matter What, Chin Up, Tits Out, The second one is called When All Else Fails, Chin Up, Tits Out. And it is, the first one is actually novella length. It's about 77 pages. And then the second one is a full-length novel, something over 300. I don't remember the exact page count, but they follow the story of Hadley and this life-changing event that happens to her. And it's actually a series of life-changing events and how she handles them and what happens when you have your life planned out and then something changes the course of that map and you have to figure out what's worth fighting for, what you're going to, how you're going to deal with things. She's a very loving and supportive family, which is great. There is, the way each book starts out gives you an idea of where the series is going. And I'm not going to give anything away, but you do have an idea that things are not going to go really as planned because of the way each book starts out with kind of this, current, what's going on currently in Hadley's life, and then she looks back and talks about this journey that has brought her to where she is now. The books are funny. Hadley talks to herself in her head a lot, like we all do. And Miranda does a great job of capturing that voice of the, just like sometimes you ever have that moment where it's really a split second. You can have an entire run-on sentence conversation in your head. Well, Hadley, or Miranda transcribes that. And it's the way she does it. It fits perfectly into the story. It makes sense and it makes you feel like, yeah, I've been there. I know how that feels. So I'm going to go ahead and turn now to the interview with Miranda so she can tell you more about Hadley and this mantra of chin up, tits out. So let's get to the interview with Miranda Oh. Miranda, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here today.
I am really excited to talk to you about your series. Before we get to the books, though, would you just start by sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Miranda, and I am from Manitoba, Canada. So right smack dab geographically in the center where it's prairies and flat and cold in the winter and beautiful and hot in the summertime. Today it's in Celsius, it's like -2, which is so warm for this time of December. I'm actually considering doing an outdoor run after today's interview, and I'm a little bit excited about it because it is so nice. So anyways, that's a little bit about where I come from. I like to run. I like to play yoga or do yoga. I'm whatever you want to do when it comes to 6 a.m. hot yoga. I'm down and 100% in it. And when it comes to my writing and what I do professionally, I work in corporate insurance as a trainer, and I write my books on the side, do some speaking about positivity and whatnot. And I'm also an Airbnb host. So I would say about 90 to 95% of the year, I have strangers come live with me and they leave as friends, and it's quite wonderful. So that's just a little bit about me.
Fun. I love that you're an Airbnb host. I'm sure you meet all sorts of really interesting people.
Oh, yeah.
Who may or may not end up in a book someday, I would think.
It is quite funny. When I do go out on dates, it comes up in a conversation going like, are you going to write about this? I'm like, I don't know, actually. Like, it's kind of a determination on you and how you deal with our connection is if I'm going to write about you. If you're impactful, I might write about you in a good way or a bad way. Or if you're not really impactful, then no, I probably won't write about you. It's the real truth out there.
That's right. And just for my listeners who are not so familiar with Celsius, I mean, you said it's -2 and that's warm. Most of us hear -2, or many people hear -2, and but I looked, it's about 28 degrees, which still for a lot of people is not warm, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. I mean, if you have one of those temperature calculators in front of you, it gets to like -50 Celsius here, which is like close to -50 Fahrenheit, I believe. Like it's minus something. I don't know how the conversion works at all, but all I know is -50, it hurts to breathe outside. Like you do not do anything. Are you going to work today? Yeah, from my couch. You want me to go out there? Nope. Not at all.
Have you seen the one meme that says, why do I live where the air hurts my face?
Yeah. But I do have an answer to that, though. Like, because people are like, well, why do you live where you live? Outside of the fact that I'm born and raised and have roots here and I absolutely love my family and I want to be around them. That's why I want to live here. But when we have -50, it freaks all the people out. So, one, we have a reduction in people on the streets. We have a reduction in homelessness. We have a reduction in like disease. Things get frozen and things get quieter, and it forces us up here to just kind of almost hibernate and then press the restart button and do it all over again when the springtime and everything starts to melt. So we have 4 very different seasons, and that gives us, as people that live through here, an opportunity to evolve and change literally 4 times throughout the year. So if you break it down that way, it's pretty cool. And the cold, again, scares all the crazy people away, in my mind anyway.
Right, nice. Canadian weather aside, I suppose we should probably talk about your books, which is why you're here. So you have a series, and each book contains the phrase "Chin Up, Tits Out." The first one is called Remember, no matter what, Chin Up, Tits Out. So can you talk a little bit about the series and your inspiration for it?
Yeah, of course. So Chin Up, Tits Out, let's just break that down for a minute here. So if you think about lifting your chin up or holding your head up high, and then sticking your shoulders back, or, proud chest, whatever you want to call it, when you do those 2 very small but very conscious movements, we, to other people, look confident. But the science inside of us, I'm not a scientist, but the dopamine and serotonin and all the good, wonderful chemicals, they release when we do those things, those little movements. So in a moment where everything else seems to be failing, and, remembering that no matter how bad things get, if you do and you dedicate yourself to these 2 small movements, and it's a consistent thing, that, the tough is not going to be as tough to deal with. We're guaranteed to get tough. That's what life is all about. But it's our choice as to how tough we want to make this on ourselves. And those little 2 body movements through my life have helped me stay ridiculously positive going through some interestingly heavy stuff in my 20s. Now, who doesn't go through interestingly heavy stuff in their 20s? Everybody does. It's just in a bajillion different capacities. So what I did was I took it and I wrote it, and I said, here, let's resonate, let's connect over the feelings of anxiety or fear or love or happiness or sadness. All of it. Let's talk about the real stuff that happens, strip it down to the emotions, and how to deal with those emotions in a positive way. Now, all of that is super serious. My books I try to be funny because it's a story. So it's not a self-help, here is step-by-step how to become a more positive person. It follows a young woman in her 20s. I'll give you 3 guesses who that is. But we meet her. When do we meet her? She's about 18, 19 years old when we meet her. She falls head over and heels in love with a boy from Africa, and she's Canadian. Now, at this point, when she does this, she just graduated from high school. She's moving into college. She owns a business. She kind of has this whole map out of what she wants in her life, and then bam, somebody with a cute accent comes and totally throws her entire life plan off. Isn't the first love just so beautiful? And so hot and heavy and heated. Again, at the end of the day, it's beautiful. You never get anything like your first love ever again after that. So we get introduced to that, and throughout the growth of this relationship, the book takes us through about 4 years, and that book topic, we talk and we touch the story in regards to some heavy topics and heavy things that we all deal with in some capacity, or know of somebody who's dealing with it in some capacity. So the first couple of books touch on immigration, long-distance relationships, racism. Now, when I say all that stuff, I'm talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of it. And then the second book, when we talk about when all else fails, we touch base on mental illness and cancer and family dynamics. As we all know, our families are so uniquely created and compiled, and everybody's family has a little bit of crazy in them, and learning to figure out what the crazy is and how to appreciate and embrace the crazy was definitely something that came out of this series. And now I'm actually prepping and really close to launching the third book of the series, which takes all of those really serious topics that I just kind of mentioned and wraps them into, okay, now you've gone through a whole bunch of stuff. How do you dig yourself out of a hole? You know, how do you survive after the loss of a loved one? How do you survive after the loss of a job? How do you survive a financial loss or the loss of your health? So, you know, so it touches base on all of these things. And again, you're still following the same young character. The whole the three books in the series encompass about a 10-year span.
So let's go ahead and take our first break of the podcast. When we come back, I'll be speaking more with Miranda about the books and about the main character, Hadley. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the backdoors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author Miranda Oh. We are talking about her series, which is called Chin Up Tits Out. Let's go ahead and get back to that interview. The young woman that you're following is Hadley. That's the main character. What about Hadley do you think will resonate with readers?
Well, I tell people, and I say it jestingly, but I really am serious. I said, my goal when writing this book was for to evoke emotion from our readers. Now, when we go to the movie theater, we don't necessarily go to a horror movie know that we're going to be laughing, or if we go to a romantic comedy that something's going to pop out and scare us, or we're going to be on the edge of our seat because it's so action-packed. That was my goal, was I want to evoke emotion. And when I was going through Hadley's stories and Hadley's moments, when Hadley's going through something difficult, the story takes the reader through it, but then it stops and it interjects into Hadley's inner voice. And Hadley's inner voice is that angel or the devil or the combination of the both, you know, whoever, whatever tone your own inner voice is. We all got a little inner voice. And that inner voice goes off and it's contradictory and it's confusing and it's loud and it's snooty, and sometimes it's full of love and confidence, and sometimes it's dark and deep and very twisted. And that piece right there was what I wanted to bring out with my readers, that when they are reading the story and watching Hadley go through something that's really intense regarding racism or regarding cancer, and then you're like, oh my God, that's insane. Or, oh, this is okay, cool, whatever your reaction is. And then it's like, what is going on inside of this person's head? Because we all know that when something happens on the outside of us, our internal mind is processing that, but probably a bunch of different versions of that as well. And it's just whatever's loudest. And so throughout the stories, the readers have an opportunity to connect with what is really going on in Hadley's mind, to either connect going, oh, man, that's cool. I thought that too when I was in a similar situation. Or on the other hand, it's, oh, man, okay. If she can think this, then what I thought wasn't that bad. Like, she's a little more crazier than I am, and I'm okay. So that validation that reader is okay wherever they are in their life. So that was the two things that I wanted. I either wanted you to be like, oh, I'm good because I'm right there with her on Hadley's crazy level, or man, that girl is crazy and my crazy level is under her. So like, I'm good. And when and then you meet the coolest people that read your book and they're like, I get it. I'm like, yes. Oh my God, that's the validation that I am not that crazy.
Yeah, I think you did a great job of capturing that inner voice, because the inner voice is not always logical or, sane. It tends to ramble on and just spew out whatever is going on. So I think you did a great job with that. You said that it's a 3-book series. What's the title of the third one that will be coming out?
The third one is Just Breathe, Chin Up Tits Out.
Okay. Good. And is there, well, you've kind of alluded to what will happen in that one. What do you hope readers will take away from the series as a whole?
Oh, I have the perfect answer for that. Well, in my mind, it's the perfect answer. It may not be the perfect answer for everybody else, but what I want my readers to take out of this is a different perspective to your happily ever after. That's what I want my readers to take away, because I know I'm 30 years old, 30 and a half, and I grew up in a very open, very relaxed, very communicative and honest household where we talked about everything. And I still grew up with this illusion that when I was getting married, that was like my happily ever after. I was getting my white picket fence, and it was like the end of a Disney movie, right? Cinderella gets her, like all the princesses got their prince at the end of the movie. And that was in my mind, this illusion that marriage was something like that. When I lost my marriage in the way that I did, you got to read the books to figure it out. But it's really quite entertaining, so you should read them, maybe, if it interests you. When I lost it, it was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? How do I move on? Then you start to connect with people, you start to talk to people about what happened, and you realize that there are so many people in the same boat as you, and they all fear the same thing, going like, how do you move on from a divorce, or how do you move on from losing a loved one, or how do you move on from a major trauma or major life change when you feel like you've hit rock bottom, if not further down than rock bottom. And through the last half of my 20s, there's a big gap between the time that I published book 2 and the time that book 3 will launch. There's a couple-year gap in there. And somebody once asked me, so why? And I said, I needed to figure out my ending. I needed to live it in order to write it. And I didn't know really what that meant. And then when I actually was ready to write my book, it just kind of came out. And it came out going, hey, like, we can have our happily ever after, and it doesn't have to be in a white picket fence. It doesn't have to be in a big old wedding. You don't even have to be with anybody to have your happily ever after, because it's all about the journey, right? There's no end except for when you pass. And when you pass, well, that's a whole other conversation. But I wanted people to take away that a happily ever after is whatever makes you feel whole as a person, whatever makes your heart feel whole, so you can love yourself and love all of those around you. And that's really what I wanted out of this whole series. And in order to be whole, and in order to love yourself wholly and unconditionally, I think one needs to go through some sort of trauma or loss or something difficult, because then you're able to experience the exact opposite in the positive emotion or the positive reaction. So that's what I hope that this series takes and gives my readers.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Another interesting thing, you said, you needed to live your ending, and so there's a gap between the second and the third book. I was curious about the difference between the first and the second book. The first book is a novella. It's only 77 pages, and then the second book is a full-length novel. And the first book ends kind of abruptly. So what was the process in, the different lengths and how that all came about?
When I started on this whole journey, I was like, hey, I want to write a book. Like, I want to write my whole story. And then I wrote what I wrote for the first book. And at that time, my publishing consultant was like, I think this is going to be your whole story is going to be too much for one book. I said, yeah, you're totally right. But I don't like even numbers. I like odd numbers. And like good things happen in threes. To good things and bad things happen in threes. So I'm like, let's do 3 books. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah. And then, so we published book 1 and I separated them. I knew what pieces of the story and how the prologue connects with the end of the book. So I'm kind of like Star Wars because I'm interestingly nerdy like that every now and then. So I mapped it all out. And then when I started to write book 2, it was like, I can't even, it just started to come out of me and it didn't stop. But when I mean it came out of me, it came out in typing it. It came out in emotion. My poor roommates, they were like, are you okay? I'm like, don't talk to me right now. And I'd be sobbing and like hammering at my keyboard, like hard hammering and have headphones on, cranked with music and a big glass of wine, never far away from me. And I just did that for 6 months. Every moment I could, I wrote and I cried, and it was such a process. And I was like, wow, that's like double whoops. It was purely by accident. So what I did to continue the accident was book 3 is a very nice settle in the middle between book 1 and book 2. So size-wise, it's a little bit smaller than book 2, but bigger than book 1. There was no process outside of just dumbfound luck.
Well, it sounds like it was very cathartic, although you may have frightened your roommates a little bit.
Oh, yeah, they took me for drives. They're like, stick your head out the window like a dog. Do you want to take me to Starbucks? Like, just like pat my head. They're like, we don't want to hug you. You'll snot cry on us. Like, okay. Yeah, they were men, so they didn't really know how to deal with a sobbing 20-something-year-old chick. Bless their souls, though. Like, they tried their best, and they were all so kind. Every now and then, at the end of the day, they would just like put a plate of food in front of me and like walk away. No words were exchanged. It's like, feed the beast. Do not talk to the beast.
So when you write about Hadley sobbing and snot bubbles and everything, you speak from experience. Oh, yeah. And usually when that happens, when I'm writing about it, that's exactly how I'm feeling at that moment. Like, when I say I try to evoke motion, it's like, if I can't evoke myself emotion, then how am I going to evoke a stranger emotion? My mother gave me that lesson, but a version of that lesson when I was young. She said, if you do not love yourself, how will anybody figure out how to love you? If you don't know how to love yourself, if you don't know how to love your flaws and your quirks and your personalities and your tendencies and your habits, but you have to turn in to figure it out, right? So it's the same concept. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there is quite a lot that is autobiographical in this series. Would you say it's mostly fictional or mostly autobiographical? How would you describe that?
Well, I wrote it fictional once I could write about people and not necessarily get their permission, like front up. I also wrote fictional because, I mean, there was a lot that happened in this series, and part of my life wasn't that exciting, and so I'm like, well, I need to like make some stuff up. But the meat and potatoes of it is based on real events. And with that said, when I go and I stamp my genre of chick lit and fiction, it's because like who wants to read an autobiographical piece of work about a prairie girl from Winnipeg that people haven't heard, and if they heard, it's like this really, really, really cold place. And it's like, well, no, it's actually, the story really doesn't have anything to do with a cold place or talk about, the small little town of stuff. It really has to do with the story of somebody's 20s and how they explore and experience and fall face first into life, that they pick themselves back up and keep moving forward. And I think all of us do that in our 20s, trying to figure out who we are. So it was just kind of a celebration of it.
Mm-hmm. And what kinds of research then did you do for the book, if any?
Well, I mean, I did have to talk about, well, I didn't have to, but in the books, when I talk about racism, I was speaking from an apartheid point of view. I did spend some time in South Africa and ran into some just difficulties as a result of what happened through the apartheid. And I only got experience from what I went through personally, and that was one family's version of what happened. So in order for me to write about it from an unbiased and open point of view, I had to do research for that. In the second book, there was some medical research that I had to do around cancer treatments and mental illness and addictions. Again, I had only had hands-on experience with what I dealt with and what my family encountered during that time. And as much as I jotted everything down, recorded conversations, had binders color coordinated and alphabeticalized, and I still felt that I needed to do the research to make sure that I'm talking about the medications or the treatments appropriately in a manner that gives the book some validity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we are going to take our second break of the podcast, but I just wanted to say, when you hear a title like Chin Up Tits Out and you hear chick lit, the first thing you might think of is, oh, that's just a silly series, or, oh, whatever, I'm not interested. But when you listen to Miranda speak about it and you actually read the books, it deals with some pretty heavy topics. Granted, it's done so with humor and grace and love, etc., but it deals with the heavy topics that we deal with in life and the choices that we make and the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And so, you can't judge a book by its cover or its title. And the covers are a lot of fun, and they look like, they would be what they are, which is funny and romantic comedy kind of things. But, there's also these other layers and these other issues. So let's go ahead and take that second break of the podcast. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion to my interview with author Miranda Oh. So this is a 3-book series, and maybe this is premature, but are you working on anything new at the moment, or just focusing on finishing this up and getting it out?
A little bit of both. So I have done the mental brainstorming of what my next series is going to be. And I have kind of put a little bit of the framework together around the research. The research for this series is going to be, in my mind, huge, but it's because I put that on my own self. Like, I set the expectation of that. So my next series, again, we're talking about super heavy life stuff, but figuring out a way to, find positivity out of it. So in August of this year, I was diagnosed with endometriosis and adenomyosis, so the reproductive conditions that affect 1 in 10 women globally. And I had no idea what this was. I thought everything was just normal, and that was normal to be in pain, and it wasn't. And then you start talking to people, and you're like, oh, my God. Man, I've spent the last 5 years talking and telling my story on how to connect through long-distance relationships and how to connect and resonate with people who have gone through racial issues or immigration issues or cancer or mental illness, because all of us at some point have kind of touched or heard of or is connected to all of those pieces. Now I have a real life experience. Yay. So let's turn that into a series. So that's what I'm doing. But again, I need to talk to other women that have gone through it. I mean, my journey, I'm only about 2 years into it, and I know women globally that have been fighting this fight for years, and there's no cure for either of them, and the treatment options are difficult. And it's different for everyone. I mean, yeah, you're right. You're totally right. It's so different for everybody. And so this is my way of, one, connecting with a bunch of women who, when you fight the good fight, you have an opportunity to connect with somebody. So that's why I want to interview a bunch of women that have dealt with it, to learn more about what their stories are like and what their journeys have looked like compared to mine. And then that's going to be the second series that I launch. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, that sounds great, actually. And I think it will really resonate with, because like you said, 1 in 10 women. And if you don't have it, I'm sure most people know someone. I mean, I can think of 2 people that I'm very close to just off the top of my head that have it and have it in very different ways, like I said. So yeah, exactly. It'll be nice to, one, representation matters. So to see themselves in fiction, but also to have kind of that, normal isn't the word that I necessarily want, but it's part of life, and to see it portrayed in a book as like, this is life and life goes on, and sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's not. Yep. So is writing something that you've always wanted to do, writing fiction? And, how did you get into it in terms of publishing?
Well, I remember going to a tutor when I was in grade 3 because I couldn't read or write. And then as soon as I figured out how to do the basics of it, I was just spitting out stories all the time with my tutor. And I just remember my mom always telling me that you're just such a storyteller. And that translated through my life, that, Monday morning when you see all your school friends, well, we're congregating and hearing about all the stories that happened in my life. And that just translated even into my adult life. You go to work and Monday morning coffee time is like, all right, let's talk about all the craziness that happened in my weekend this weekend. Like, what did you do? You watched the whole thing on Netflix? Cool. Let me list the things that I did. So storytelling, 1, has always come naturally to me. 2, I write everything down anyways. So when it came to actually turning all of these little quirks and habits and, good things that I guess I possess, into something that would turn into a book, that decision was think around the time my divorce became finalized. So I was 25-ish, and I did a big career change. I went from the auto industry into corporate. The auto industry, I was working like 60, 70 hours a week, 6 days a week. It was nothing but dealership, focus. And I was so busy. And then I go to corporate, and it's like Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, and you're like, oh, okay, so 5:30, what do I do? So all of the years that I spent running after everything that kind of happened, and I hit quote unquote rock bottom, I was so busy with work, I dove headfirst into life. And then the corporate job slowed my role a lot. And when that happened, my mind played funny tricks on me. It was like, all the stuff that you've tried to forget or have been too busy to remember, we're going to put into your brain right now. So it was like a flood of overwhelming memories, good memories, bad memories, all the memories. I'm like, whoa, I forgot about 95% of these. So I started to write. That was the only way I could get them out and keep them out. And once they were on paper, I was like, oh, okay, I feel better now. So I wrote book 1 in 4 days, like 2 weekends, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days, 4 hours each day. And then sent it. I knew a friend of mine who was a consultant, and I said, listen, like, I want to make this happen. And he said, let's do this. And I think like 90 days later, I had my launch party. Like, it was so fast. And then 11 months later, I published my second book. So, like, talk about when you find a project and you want to run away from everything, just dive headfirst into that. And then that, I think, was a huge contributor of why I needed to take a break before I could publish the third or even write the third one, because I was just so busy. I'm like, I need to just chill out, and I need to like relish and live in this book launch. My second book launch was just so much fun.
Maybe you needed a nap too.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I actually have to thank the diagnosis this summer because it's really forced me to slow down and like look at my calendar and assess what is most important to me to do this week, because I know I'm not going to be able to accomplish all of it. So I have to like X-nay plan. So I really check in, and I have to check in on a daily basis, a weekly basis. I don't think a lot of people do that. And I do thank this endo and adeno diagnosis for forcing me to create a habit like this.
That's at least something positive, or you're seeing as a positive came out of that. That's wonderful. So it sounds like for you, writing really came from a process and from a lot of your own life experience. Out of all of that, would you have advice for other aspiring authors?
Yes, just write it down and go after it. If you have a feeling, and it's in the back of your mind that you can't scratch, just do it. I know a lot of people out there in life, but especially artists, especially authors, if you're writing and you're creating and you feel like it fuels that fire inside of you, there's absolutely no shame in going out and sharing that with the world. You're not going to please everybody. That's not about what it's about. What it is about is that you will connect with somebody, and you will connect with people that you least expected to. And those are the most wonderful opportunities that you can get in this life. So my advice is that if you are creating and you are nervous about putting it out there, but this creation is close to your heart, just do it. Like Nike, just do it. Just do it.
You are one of the most positive people I think I have ever met, and maybe you should have your own podcast.
I do have my own
podcast.
Okay, I do. I'm a co-host of a podcast called Quill and Ink. Me and my co-host Jenna Green, we are both represented by the same publicity company, and absolutely love our publicist. But he's like, "Hey guys, want to host your own podcast?" We're like, "Yeah."
I have seen that on the Facebook page. Okay, that's you. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's just me. Yeah, we've only launched our intro episode, and we did an episode with Edward Willett, who's like huge, and
he's been on the podcast.
Yeah, he has. Right? Isn't he amazing? He's just so communicative, and we were so nervous, but he handled it so well. And we have some really big authors coming next year as well. So, it's just super funny that you should say that. I'm a brand new podcast co-host.
Well, since we're talking about it, do you want to tell people where they can find it?
Yeah, for sure. You can find it at the podcast name is called Quill and Ink, a podcast for book lovers. You can find it on Authors on the Air on Facebook or the SoundCloud channels or our YouTube channel. So Authors on the Air. Really excited.
That is very exciting. That's really cool. So when you take time to read for yourself, what are your go-to authors or genres?
Ooh, okay. So you know how I told people, or told you all, I guess, that when I write, I want to evoke motion, and it's usually emotion of like, oh, I'm equally as crazy as that, or like that girl is absolutely crazy and I'm not that crazy. I go to the people that write about the craziest stuff. I don't read as much as I would like to because I have too much on the go. But I do enjoy Chelsea Handler's books, and I know that is so odd, but I just absolutely love reading about her life because it makes me feel like I'm so tame, and I know that I am not, but I feel so tame, and she's a successful person, and she's super honest, and that's really what I try to live my life. So I use her as an inspiration. But then on the other hand, when I pick up and I want like something that will page turn me and like give me, the pit in my stomach and make me cry, like, you're going to go to a drama movie, or you're going to go, you're not necessarily going expecting to laugh. You pick up books that you're not going to laugh at. Lawrence Hill is a Canadian author, and I absolutely love his writing. He has a book called The Book of Negroes, and it's a story that follows a young girl who literally walks across Western Africa in a slave trade and then gets shipped to the U.S. and then goes to it's this whole story over, I don't know, decades. And it was the biggest book I ever accomplished, and I've read it 3 times just because I don't know what it does. You know what I do? It evokes motion for me, and that's why I'm connected to it.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Well, you mentioned where we can find the Quill and Ink podcast. How about you? Do you have a website, or where can people find you on social media? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a website. It's www.mirandao.com, and O is OH. Now, if you hashtag Chin Up Tits out, you'll find me. It's pretty easy. Or you can go on Instagram or Twitter, and my handle is Miranda Oh, so OH, Miranda OH. And on Facebook, I am Miranda Oh, author of the Chin Up Tits Out series. And I think that's all. You can find my books on Amazon. Okay. That's the cherry on top.
All right. Well, it has been so much fun to talk to you today. We've talked about a lot of different things, which has been great. But is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to bring up now in terms of writing or your books, or just anything that we haven't covered?
I think we covered it all. So, really the only thing I want to touch base is on thank you. I'm super grateful and appreciative for your time and for your efforts and the chat that we had today. I always appreciate an interview. So thank you.
And thank you once again to Miranda for taking the time right before Christmas to talk to me about her trilogy. The next one will be out sometime in 2020, so looking forward to that and finding out the conclusion of this story and what happens with Hadley, because there's a lot that goes on in this series, and I am interested to know how it all turns out, A little bit of closure is always nice. So, again, the series is Chin Up Tits Out, or I like to abbreviate it CITO when I'm writing it. That has nothing to do with anything. It won't help you find anything, but random fact. And there are 2 books currently out. They are available on Amazon. Quick read, fun reads. So if you are looking for something to read while you're maybe still on Christmas vacation, this could be a possibility for you. Thank you, as always, for joining me. Please join me again next time. And if you are a fan of the podcast, you know that it always helps us out if you can subscribe, like, follow, tweet, retweet, do all of those wonderful things that really help us out, and especially those reviews. If you could write us a nice review or just give us 5 stars, hey, it's Christmas, the season of giving. We'd appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and of course that weekend involves time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.